Good. So, welcome to the Corporate Escape Artist Podcast, everybody. Today is another day in the corporate matrix for most of you. And we have today Matt Coffman, who I really want Matt to tell his story, and Heidi really wants Matt to tell his story. This was like a lot of based on Heidi's desire to hear this mindset of somebody who, Matt, you didn't end up in corporate. You had this entrepreneurial mindset from early on. And so many people in the corporate world, they wait for people to tell them what to do. They wait for people to tell them where to sit, what to work on. And they never feel that they have the confidence to break free and do something that they've always wanted to do. And yet you've been able to do this from the very start, it seems like to us, based on your story. We would love it if you would tell some of that story to today's audience. And for the person listening to this story, really attempt to figure out like, how does somebody like Matt come into the world and just do these entrepreneurial things seemingly without fear? And maybe you can talk about some of that and keep moving forward to be successful and not fall back on just going out and getting like a random job so that someone pays you for doing things that they want you to do. So, Matt, could you start out just by telling some of your origin story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I always say I'm not really like some kind of health expert or biohacker per se. We can get into why I'm starting to become anti-biohacker a little bit later, but that's a big topic I've been talking about a little bit. But I grew up in Flint, Michigan, very, poor, no father. As I always say, my mom caught my dad like, I think he probably partied quite a bit, but then he was like smoking crack in the basement, and I was only like a couple months old, so she kicked him out of the house. I think we even moved to West Virginia for a few days. I was like too little, obviously, to remember, but heard the story later on. And then we ended up coming back ultimately. So, in elementary, I'm like one of like three white kids. And then my mom was dating a black guy for a while, and he was just kind of a hustler. He never went to work, but always had money. And, I didn't really know what was going on because I was a little bit too young. But as I got older, I started to pick up like this guy never goes to work and he's always got money, right? And so maybe that growing up with him as a stepdad, I instilled a little bit of that hustler in me in general, but kind of in some of the wrong ways, being in the streets, selling weed, doing things like that. And so when I went to college, I kind of wanted to like break free from some of that and just, I was always good in academics, but I had a lot of obviously emotional trauma from my mom also was always like bartending and serving, doing odd jobs. Sometimes she'd have two and three jobs, part-time type thing. So I'd be at school all day and sometimes she wouldn't even be home at night. So it'd just be like me and my older brother, who was like 7 years older than me. And she even took care of a couple of my older cousins. So it's kind of like me just with them. It's like kind of like a free for all, do whatever you want, but also not a lot of like love and emotional and caring. So I was kind of like a lone wolf, just did whatever I wanted, didn't have many rules. Luckily, I didn't wind up in jail or prison, I guess, but maybe God had a different plan for me in that aspect. But I went to college. I wanted to be different from the rest of my family. I had a lot of immune problems growing up as well. So it's kind of like a mixture of the emotions and the immunological stuff. I had a bunch of ear infections and like 12 different ear surgeries, and I had a hernia and pneumonia, and I would have these skin rashes. And my mom had to use, before it was like cool, she had to like go buy different like laundry detergent without chemicals and had to use like sensitive skin lotions and things like that. So I was already very sensitive on immunological front, which will come into play in my story later. Um, so when I went to college, I was kind of like different. I was like, I've had have some regular jobs throughout my life, and those have generally been serving because, in my opinion, those allowed me flexibility. Like, when you're serving tables, you can leave for like a month at a time and they don't care. A lot of times, like someone can just work your shift. So for me, it was perfect because I like the flexibility of everything. I didn't never want to be tied down, and you can make a lot of money in a little bit of time. So that was good for me throughout college. And then I've went back and forth throughout some of those jobs over my life as well. But after I got out of college, I actually started to grow cannabis. So it was interesting. I kind of told you guys that I had a pre-law degree and I kind of used that to stay out of jail. It's kind of a little funny joke that we would tell. But um, with that freedom of growing cannabis, I had a dispensary for a little while, and it was starting to get like a lot of big money was buying into it. So I seen it before it happened. I had made a bunch of good money. I had been my own boss. And, but with that came a lot of different addictions. So I was didn't have to answer to anybody, right? And I was grown at that time. So, I'm partying, I'm doing Vicodin, I'm taking Adderall, I'm drinking all the time, and obviously smoking cannabis because I'm growing it and it's free or close to free. And so that just happened for a while throughout my 20s. I loved it. I wouldn't take it back. Went to the Super Bowl by myself and, partied and was popping bottles, like thought I was a rapper or some kind of entertainer or whatever the hell was going on. It was super fun, super crazy, like would stay up for 3 days at a time. And towards the end, it started to get old. And I was with my now wife, Cole, that you guys have met, and we had just started dating and she moved in with me. And, it's kind of like we were still partying a lot, but I was like starting to feel like just wore out of it. I think my body was starting to shut down at that time. And I blamed it more so on just partying too much because I didn't really know that there was like this deeper stuff that was to come going on underneath. And so I decided to like just sell everything. I had my house paid off there in Flint, which is pretty cheap to pay off a house in Flint, but nevertheless, we didn't have any rent for a few years there. And all of my cannabis grow equipment and everything, sold it all off and moved down to Tampa. Didn't really know what I was going to do. It was like, I'll serve some tables or I'll do whatever. I got a little bubble of money and a house paid off that I'm going to sell and things like that. And I'll just figure it out. And I just quit smoking weed and quit going out. And I drank a little bit when I first came down here, but it was kind of more rare here and there, and definitely not as hard as I used to. But I realized how severe after like quitting doing the Adderall and smoking all the weed and things like that, that I really couldn't almost think straight. Like I could barely have enough energy to go get a workout in. I thought I was just going to come down and get sober and just like be working out all the time like I used to and getting sunshine and doing the grounding and meditating, and everything was going to be great. And it wasn't really that way. So I started seeing different functional doctors. I had been kicked onto Ben Greenfield's podcast, so I kind of knew not to go like the medical route. And also, my brother had went to the doctor quite a while back, and he got put on different anxiety drugs and SSRIs and things like that. And I think it kind of zombified him, and he's kind of never been the same person ever since, in my opinion. So I knew I didn't want to take that route, and I knew there had to be something underneath the surface that was causing a lot of the dysfunction, because I was merely only like 30 years old or so. And I'm like, am I just going to live like this forever? Like I got a whole life to live and I cannot live like this. I'd rather die. I'd rather just give up and altogether. So I got bounced around between a few different doctors and, trying different adrenal fatigue approaches. And it was all just functional medicine. And I think even the functional medicine space has become a little bit of like pill pushing and, throwing just magnesium and different herbs at things without getting to the root. And so I finally found my way over to Dr. Minkoff and was diagnosed with Lyme. And I had Epstein-Barr and I had Babesia. So I did like a $20,000 protocol with him, and it was like HOCAT saunas and lots of different IVs, glutathione IVs, ozone IVs, Myers cocktail. It's like 50 different supplements. I'm injecting peptides. And I go through this $20,000 protocol and I still pretty much feel awful. Like my wife, Cole, thought I got a little bit better, but honestly, I just still felt miserable. And it was at that moment I realized pretty much nobody was going to come save me until I just kept experimenting and trying. And that's how I got into the hair tissue mineral analysis and all the stuff that I went through today. So it was like a combination of a lot of emotional things, um, a lot of immunological problems that like combined together. And then I had to work through a lot of them. And I've done a lot, I'm a combo practitioner as well. I've done a lot of different psychedelic ceremonies that have helped with healing. But the main thing that was the catalyst for me was getting into the mineral space and the detoxification of the heavy metals.
Yeah, I'd love to get into more of what you do now and how you found that and why you think it helped so much. First, though, like there was a lot of stuff from your story, Matt. Like I'm thinking about that, and we grew up not completely similar, but close. So I grew up in New York. We were very poor growing up, and my mom was also not home very often because she was always working. And so my brother and I were left home to our own devices, extremely independent. Had to learn how to make dinner for the family, like at a really young age, like 8, 9 years old, having to make dinner because mom wasn't around. But I didn't like I loved watching the movies in the 80s where people were like businessmen and entrepreneurs and they made all this money. And like I really wanted to be that, but I didn't know anything about it. Um, So I went to college and then I got a job in the corporate world, and I never even had a thought of being an entrepreneur and not getting some sort of corporate job where they give me money in a paycheck. So how did you go from college to like growing weed and selling that? Like, how did that even happen that that was a possibility and not just getting a job from whatever you're going to college for?
Yeah, it was super interesting. Obviously, I was just partying with friends just in college because it's just what you do in your off time. And it was summertime before my last semester, and we started hanging out with this guy, Luke, and he had a buddy that had like a giant barn of weed. Like it looked like a movie, right? And this was like before, like right when it was first fresh. Apparently, his dad was like kind of already growing it illegally before he passed away. So he kind of was already showing him. So as soon as it became legal, this guy like had money and just like threw it all into this giant barn, like a little bit outside of Flint. You know, he's on a couple acres and things like that. And he took me over there and I was like, just looked around. I'm like, hold on, like this is legal? Like I used to like sell this stuff in high school, you know, and it's like always like worried about getting caught. And now this guy's just like got 72 giant plants in this barn that's just legal. Like the cops can come over and he can just show him cards and he's good. And then you're still obviously taking the risk on the back end because it's only supposed to be for your patients and stuff. So you're still definitely in the black market when you're doing that. But they can literally come to your house and you can just show them your medical cards and you can get, you know, you can't get in trouble. So you got to basically get caught selling it. But what happened there, I think, is that with that freedom unleashed like a demon inside of me. I always felt like I never wanted to answer to anybody. I was always kind of a rebel like that, anyways. Like I thought school was kind of prison. I just kind of did it, I think, because I was good at it. And it was kind of easy to me. And I never really like knew exactly what I was going to do. The pre-law thing was setting me up to maybe go to law school. And I started researching how a lot of them are miserable and they just drink and do drugs as well. And they're not really all that happy either. So, you know, I got introduced to that world. So that freedom is something that I've always fought back for, even after moving down here and getting a regular job and always just keeping whatever little serving job that I had. You kind of do have freedom. Like you can wake up and just give a shift away or whatever happens. So that is what unleashed it in me. I didn't know anything about business or taxes. I'm still learning. Like I just opened the supplement company. I mean, I have no idea how to file these taxes. I'm like working with this accountant right now. Like I don't know anything either. I'm just an average guy with a mom who was a bartender with no role model or anything. You hire people, you get an accountant. I literally was just selling supplements. The lady's like, "Have you done anything with your taxes?" I'm like, "Ma'am, I've literally just sold the supplements. That's all I've done. I don't know anything about how we're about to file these taxes, what we're gonna owe. All I know is the supplements are selling and the business is doing good." So it's like you just have to learn on the go. There's really no other way. You can sit around and read books, and I love books and I love podcasts. And it still didn't set me up for learning how to run my HTMA business or how to run my supplement business. It was just like us posting online, clients liking the products, and then figuring everything out like as it goes. But really, it all circles back to that freedom that I had in my 20s where I could just, you know, I don't care about partying anymore, but, you know, I was able to do whatever I wanted. So I've always like took in that and was like, I don't know, how can I get back to that? Because that freedom was so freeing. I seen everyone in their 20s like wasting some of their most valuable years. You know, maybe they didn't need to party, but they were just like working 60 hours a week and having kids. And I was just like having fun and doing reckless stuff and doing traveling, you know, whenever I wanted. I'd go to Mexico, I'd go wherever. So I always wanted to get back to that. And it took a grind and it took a while, but I think it was just the freedom that I had in my 20s.
That's so beautiful, Matt. There's an author that I adore. Her name is Marie Forleo. Are you familiar with her?
Now,
Her book is Everything is Figure Outable.
mm,
And it's so true, right? And it's like, how do I do taxes? I don't know. You figure it out, right? Like you grind, you go until, and like that's something because I homeschool my kids and they're a little bit older, but like thinking about teaching, you know, like that mindset to I don't, and it doesn't matter how old you are, but younger people, right? It's like, no, you go until, and I don't know how many times I've had to go over this with my own children. Like you keep going until you figure it out. Like you don't let things come up and stand in your way, right? Like that's what
mhm.
people who take action and who do things to serve people, do great things, whatever. Like it's figure outable. You just got to like keep going. And I think perseverance seems like a really good word. Like you kept persevering. And then it led to some magical things in your life. I remember when we were at the mastermind, you were talking about how when you moved to Tampa, you're like, I don't know, like I didn't know what I was going to do, but like all of a sudden this thing came into my life and this thing came in my life. And I'd love you to like, can you share with us what those things were? Do you know what I'm
As
saying?
in, I
Well,
don't know
you were
exactly.
well, like you're like, I live in this condo and right. And it's like, it was a succession of magical things that kept coming into your life because in my opinion is like, you're taking right action. And so the universe is like, you're creating this reality tunnel and it's like giving you evidence of like, yeah, like keep following this, Matt. Right.
No, so the other aspect about creating something that works is alignment, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I tried the dispensary thing, I tried the cannabis thing. It didn't fail, it didn't lose money, but it didn't put me in the position that I'm heading to now, right? Because it was just a means to an end and I was just focused around money. So
Right.
it took a lot of years of healing and getting into something that I was passionate about where everything aligns, right? And so the condo thing's super random. My wife trains this millionaire lady, and my wife literally is a big manifestation person as well. And she's like, we just need to lower our bills. And then this lady just offers this like $600,000 condo to us for almost nothing. So that's like a bizarre thing. And then like obviously I always thought about like doing supplements with a couple other people, but it never really like panned out, never really started it officially. And then I found like the right partner that was also involved in the hair tissue mineral analysis space. And then also I found a lot of healing in hair tissue mineral analysis. And so now I'm a practitioner within that. And then I've always liked to just learn and talk. And I grew up listening to tons of interviews. I was saying this on my story not too long ago. Like I actually used to more so than watch TV. I would watch like rap interviews and different entertainers on interviews. Like I would pay extra for Howard Stern interviews. So it makes sense that I'm also now doing interviews, right? So there's different things that are all aligned, and that's what makes the most sense. So when you're only pushing for six figures or looking for $1 million, that's going to be more stressful and less impactful anyways, but it's it doesn't always work because once you call things in and you get straight with what you want and you have a purpose around it, then the universe opens things up similar to just as we're just talking about taxes, right? So I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to file these taxes. I was kind of putting it off, and then my accountant told me that I couldn't file my own personal taxes until we had the business stuff aligned. I didn't know that either. So that's another. So I was like, okay, I guess we got to figure this out like right now. And so I'm like, who can be like lead us in the right direction, back to being aligned? A lady that goes to Cole's yoga studio, ended up talking to her, and she's like a lawyer slash accountant. And she's like, oh yeah, I specialize in difficult partnerships, and we have one partner who's in the UK, so it's obviously difficult around
Oh.
taxes on how he's involved and how we should pay him or what he should be. And she's like, oh yeah, that's what I specialize in. So that's like another thing that is just like called alignment. And I will say I do think that the quantum upgrade frequencies do something very bizarre. I've heard that from countless people, like whether you have a Lila Q block or you have the quantum upgrade frequencies on. And I always have them running prosperity and abundance. And I don't know, things just keep getting weirder and weirder and better. So I'm just going to keep them on.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. I love that. Like, why not?
Like the best $80 I could spend.
Yeah.
Some people don't even realize like you can put these frequencies on in the background all the time. They could be healing, they could be prosperity, and like why not? Just like keep the hum of like beneficial things going on in your background. So take that to heart if you're listening to this and you're at work, and you can either put it on earbuds or you can just turn the volume down. It's the frequency itself, not how loud it is, that provides the benefit. So one thing I wanted to circle back on, Matt, is like you had mentioned about your brother and SSRIs, and like I, so I was in the corporate world and I didn't really comprehend what you're saying. Like you can figure things out like when you need to do them. So for like the whole tax thing, eventually when I got my shit together and I was doing some consulting outside of work, I realized like I got paid all this money at once. It was like my first client. All I had to do was work for them at night after work, a few hours a day or whatever. And I got like a $26,000 check. My first client, the first week that I did this. And I didn't realize that you had to pay estimated taxes as an entrepreneur. And like, if you get money, you can't wait till the end of the year and pay taxes. You're supposed to pay quarterly estimated taxes based on your income. I had no clue. I paid a penalty at the end of the year for not paying taxes sooner. So these things where most people in the corporate world have been trained, you have to know everything before you go, because otherwise you're going to quote unquote get in trouble and you might fail. But in the entrepreneurial world, and from what I'm hearing of your story, you figure it out as you go, and it's okay to not have all the answers. And most people refuse to leave their corporate job because they don't have 100% of the answers on what to do next.
What does
You're
it
looking
mean,
at me
the
weird.
SSRI?
So I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I was in the corporate world and I thought I had to know everything about being an entrepreneur to leave my corporate job. So for a decade, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and I hated my job. And I was constantly stressed and super anxious whenever I was at work because all I wanted was like to get the hell out of there. Like it was so bad. And that's not the case today because I had to fix some things. It was so bad that like my heart was pounding all the time. And I thought I was literally going to have a heart attack because I could hear my heart in my ears all day long. Like my blood pressure was really high. And this had happened for 10 years straight. And I'm like, this can't be good. And so I was just like at the end of my rope. I was freaking out. And so I called my mom, who's in the medical profession, and she's like, yeah, there's like so many people in our family that are on SSRIs. You're probably the only one who isn't. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's what I should do. And I didn't want to go on pharmaceuticals, but I literally just went to the doctor and I was like, I think I need to be on this. And they're like, here you go. They didn't even ask questions. And
Wow.
so I found what you said is like, I had zero emotions. So like totally no empathy, no emotion. My short-term memory was like non-existent during that time. I also, though, had no anxiety at all. Like I could just show up as a zombie to work. I could do my work. I could not worry about it. And I'm like, this is great. My heart's not pounding. My blood pressure was normal. Everything was like good from that standpoint. But what it was doing to my brain was ridiculous. So I took a year and I weaned myself off. So while I was on it, I did all the things that I was afraid to do: public speaking, look for a new job that involved speaking in front of others, which I couldn't possibly do before that because I would sweat and I would freak out and I would shake. I just couldn't handle it. So I experienced all those things. And it was because my understanding of the world is I had to have all the answers before I could make a move. And because I didn't have them, I was freaking out. I had anxiety and it was just destroying my quality of life. And yet you were able to move through that without the answers and keep going. And I love that. And I think most people in the corporate world have this feeling of like, I don't fit. But because it's scary on the other side, or I don't have all the answers, I'm just going to keep doing what I hate doing. And then they start taking potentially SSRIs or other things. I hear that story. I can't tell you how many times in corporate America where people are on SSRIs because they're like anxious all the time because we're doing shit that sucks and it's not aligned with our purpose. And we think we need all the answers to do something else. So, how in your life today, like you got into this hair tissue mineral analysis, how did you move? How did you find that? And how did you, like, what made you start utilizing that as a business that you've been really successful with?
Yeah, so I'm kind of kicking myself because when I was searching for answers, I had a feeling that, I got into like the mercury poisoning and I had like 8 mercury fillings that were removed improperly. And so for people that don't know, the mercury does off gas, but if you also get them removed by a regular dentist who doesn't use the vacuum and all the proper procedures like a biomimetic dentist or something like that, that it's actually worse for you and it can cause like schizophrenia and like a lot of mental disorders. And I look back at that time period, it was in high school, and I did start to become quite emotionally different. Broke up with my high school girlfriend, started sleeping around. I think I started partying a little bit more. So there's definitely some links to that exact time period the more I heal and think into it. But I ordered a hair test through Wendy Myers at one point. This was like when I first was sick. And so like something struck a chord when I was listening to her podcast, and I just tried to like analyze it myself, not really realizing how difficult it is to analyze a hair tissue mineral analysis test without actual proper training. And I was like, I don't think I need to like get the full consultation because I just got the email, right? I just paid for like the test. I didn't pay for the consultation. So I never actually did the program. And then fast forward, I'm, still searching for answers, trying different protocols, was trying Morley Robbins stuff for a bit, which I no longer agree with. And trying some crazy like high copper protocols and different things. I think I was on the high copper protocol like the first year I met you at the biohacking a little summit mastermind you guys do. I was just still playing around with stuff then. And I was actually listening to Matt Blackburn's podcast, which I ended up recently being a guest on, but he had this guy, Clark Engelbert, on, who's like one of the head HTMA people. And it just made so much sense. And I was like, I at least should try it. Like, like, cause I kept being like called to it. It's like one of them things that your soul almost like knows. Like you just keep thinking about it and thinking about it. Like I would not think about it for a couple of weeks. I'm like, man, I should really get that HTMA. And then my buddy Zach, I don't know if you guys, if Biohack Zach has ever came down there, but he's cool with Stephen Klein and David Greeny and everybody. He's a cool dude. He sent me he's like, this is the mineral guy I like, and sent me my now business partner. So it was like kind of just random, got introduced there. And so I didn't work with Clark specifically, but I've had Clark on my podcast a couple times. He's amazing. He's like a walking textbook when it comes to heavy metals and minerals. But I started working with my now business partner who does basically like similar, same protocol. And it just did so much for me. For the first time, like I seen like lots of different parasites being removed. I've seen the metals moving out on my hair test over time. I've seen the mineral patterns moving, and it was hard. It's really, really hard. Like moving around heavy metals is very stimulatory, can cause like mast cell activation, can cause histamine and lots of brain fog and fatigue. And you have to do coffee enemas and saunas. And so it's a little bit more of like a real root cause. Like, you're getting like, you can feel that it's like going deep and you're moving something around. Even the people who get off the program generally will admit they knew something was happening. Like we could tell, like it wasn't just like a herb or just like taking oregano or something. Like they can tell that it's going deep. And sometimes they quit for financial reasons or just because sometimes it's a little bit too hard for them. And so I just kept going with it and going with it. And I was actually in FDN. I think I was in FDN program when we first met. And I started to be, yeah, it's like functional
What's
diet.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a functional diagnostic nutrition. So you basically can learn how to read hormone panels and different blood work and stool tests, things that functional docs do without being like you get accredited through them. So you're not actually like a chiropractor or a doctor, but you can still run all these tests via FDN, and you're like under the umbrella of like the American Association of Drugless Practitioners and things like that. So I did
It's
like about
that's Reed Davis. And
yeah.
if you're a practitioner, you can order labs and do all this other stuff that
okay.
normally it's hard to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a cool program. I'm not against it, but I just found myself just gravitating towards the HTMA stuff, and was gonna start creating these supplements around HTMA. So I felt more disconnected from the FDN than when I started. So I just dropped out, completely lost the money. Like I don't know, most people probably would have like stuck it out because they already paid this program like $5,000 or whatever I had paid them, and I just completely dropped out and started my HTMA program with my mentor Susan. She's been doing what we call mineral balancing or HTMA for like 20 years, and did her program, and everything's been going great. It's super successful right out of the jump. Got tons of clients, and the supplements are selling like crazy. So it's super awesome.
That's amazing. So like hair tissue mineral analysis, like I'd like you to describe what it involves, but essentially what I gather you're trying to do is move toxic amounts of heavy metals out of the body. And what we find is like your earlier description is when you start to move heavy metals that your body doesn't want these metals in the body. And so it sweeps them into places to store like the metals long term. And that can cause a host of issues. And the body holds on to them for various reasons. But as you start to get rid of those heavy metals, you have to remove them from where the body's kind of hanging on to them and push them to places you can eliminate them from. And as they move through the body gets pretty disturbed, and it stirs up all these things that are associated with these metals moving through the body to get them out. And I think that's what you were describing is like this issue of like, as those things start to mobilize, like people have all sorts of issues, and it's hard to stick to the program to keep them all the way out of the body to eliminate them.
Both from like a financial standpoint, and is that called chelation? Like that's the
That's
chelating part?
a way of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's hear Matt.
I'm kind of anti-chelation because that will
Okay.
rip out beneficial minerals at the same time. So you
Ah,
see a lot of people who get worse from chelation because it's
mm,
just going to go in and rip out everything. You may remove some metals, but you also remove a lot of your beneficial minerals. So
okay.
basically everybody has a heavy metal load, especially it's like a perfect storm of why we're actually heavy metal toxic. So for one, we've ruined the farming system, which I know you guys have spoken about. There's no minerals in the food. We're cutting the fruits and everything before they're ripe. They're ripening in some ship coming across the sea, and now they're sitting in Whole Foods with wax on them and nearly no nutrients, right? So that's one problem. So we don't have the minerals we used to. The stress of everything is causing more mineral loss than normal. The
Mm,
EMFs, the environment, the unnatural corporate jobs, the toxic relationships, whatever you're in, your emotional state, all of that's causing more stress on the mineral system as well. And then metals actually gain entrance into the cell through via mineral transporters. So it's called
mm,
ionic mimicry. So if you don't have the preferred mineral in the right ratio, then it'll actually hold on to whatever toxic metals coming in the environment. And aluminum's insane. Every single chart. Like there's not a single person who's not. You can live in the middle of nowhere and they're still spraying the sky with chemtrails and you're breathing in aluminum.
yeah.
Every single chart, my business partner works with some people from the Amish community. Like think about that. Like they're doing no EMFs, no electronics, and you'll still see like heavy metals in this group because it's just
Mm,
everywhere. And so we use the entire mineral system to basically kind of reverse engineer everything and shift all the patterns. And over time, you will actually begin to release metals. So you may see your first test have like no metals. You'll probably always see aluminum because I see it on every single test, but
mm,
sometimes the rest are really low. And we call those poor eliminators. Basically, just means your body doesn't have the energy to actually release those metals at the time. So it
mm,
doesn't mean that you actually don't have lead or you don't have arsenic. It just means that you're holding on to them. And so you'll actually retrace back through a lot of your old mineral patterns. So there's a lot of patterns you've been through throughout your lifetime that actually led you to whatever burnt out state or whatever state you're in right now. And so and we're just always manipulating everything back and forth. And the reason I like HTMA versus other, mineral, there's Oligo scans, there's blood tests, there's different ways to measure minerals is because the hair is always growing at about the same rate. And so we get that inch to an inch and a half closest to the scalp. And that's going to give us a 3 month average. So similar to, may say, maybe people on your show probably understand like circadian rhythm. Minerals also move around the system within time cycles. So
mm,
a blood test or a snapshot in time is going to give you an inaccurate reading. Also, things like calcium, you have an unlimited store of calcium. It can always be pulled from the bones, the teeth, wherever it needs to be to make sure that it's where it needs to be level wise within the blood. So the body will just tap into your stores. And so I think that most people, I see them all the time, have deranged mineral patterns, heavy metal toxicities, and they're probably the leading cause of ADD, anxiety, chronic fatigue, different chronic infections, because as the heavy metals shut down the immune system, you'll also harbor more of the parasites, more candida, and all of the things that end up disrupting the system. So we're trying to move the heavy metals out of the way. And then at the same time, you'll begin to see the chronic fatigue lift or the brain fog over time. Just depends on how severe, like Cole does mineral balancing and she didn't really have that hard of a program. Maybe the first
mm,
test or two, she took some naps. She didn't really have to hit the coffee enemas hard like I did or the sauna. So everyone's at a different starting place.
mm.
But if you are in a place where you're pretty fatigued and pretty burnt out, you'll probably have a harder time coming out.
So do you see anything, any discrepancies between men and women? And do women have like different, you were talking about calcium, it just made me think about like osteoporosis and aging women and menopause. Do you see in different, like, not just gender, but different brackets of women too, like menopause, premenopause, postmenopause? Anything?
Uh, Generally, I mean, patterns tend to look very similar in a lot of my tests that I see if they're paying me. Usually, you're usually in
Uh-huh.
sympathetic dominance of some sort, where you're always basically in fight or flight, even when you're at rest, and you're always kind of doing too much. But a lot of the patterns, everyone can be kind of different. It really just depends. Generally, the older they are, I get a lot of clients that are a little bit older because they're decades into building up the toxicity. And
Right.
then now it's kind of sad because I work with a lot of kids and we're like
Oh.
four generations into passing down not only toxicity but our mitochondrial function in general and our energy
Mm.
systems. So like I'll do a family and they'll all be pretty much identical, like the
Mm.
5-year-old, the mom, and the dad. So the burnt
Really?
out patterns that we're pushing through with coffee and, you know, different stimulants, whatever we're using, we're still passing that down to the kids. And now the kids are rough too. We used to, like 40 years ago, like 4 lows is a pattern that's like what we call like the most burnt out pattern of all hair tissue mineral analysis. Like 40 years ago, we wouldn't see a single kid in 4 lows, and now it's, you know, beyond common. It's like every other test.
What?
So what you said coffee, and then you also said coffee enema. Sorry, I just had to I pulled a tick off the dog. I
Sounds
had to
like,
go.
speaking of
Yeah.
Lyme disease, he had a tick.
All
So
good.
it's like, let me get rid of this
That's
tick.
kind of gross, but we hike a lot.
So yeah, it's tick season here. So every once in a while, like I'll feel something and I'm like, okay, like I gotta go take care of this. Sometimes whatever. So you mentioned coffee enemas as removing these minerals from the body, but then I heard you mention like we get metals like from coffee. Are you saying like from drinking coffee? Is that an issue?
Now, I just kind of brought up coffee as like people using stimulants to push through their burnt out patterns. The
Okay.
coffee and the coffee enemas actually, even if you're kind of sensitive to coffee, I'm sure you know. Generally, even people who are sensitive to coffee can do a coffee enema just because it's not absorbed in the same manner. But what we're doing is, as we build up the toxicity, the gallbladder and the liver, they start to get very stagnant. They can't basically, so we're using like things like ox bile and pancreatic enzymes on the program as well, as long as along with trimethylglycine to make the toxins a little bit more water soluble. But generally the coffee enemas help a lot, especially in the beginning, because the bile's just been so sluggish for so long that we're going to try to stimulate that with the caffeine, dump it into the, you know, intestinal tract, and then get it out via removal with the coffee enema. And people feel just a night and day difference. Like anytime that I have a client who's kind of starting off and hitting me up with all these bizarre symptoms, like my first question is like, are you doing the coffee enemas? And it's generally no. I'm like, well, you need to start doing the coffee enemas.
This is
I have a question.
I
It's my turn.
what if I'm on a coffee enema still?
I know. Are
Okay.
you putting supplements in the enema too, Matt?
So I played around with that before I got onto mineral balancing, and you know I would do methylene blue and copper, and I was tried all these crazy different humic and fulvics and different things, and I never really noticed too much. There was a I can't remember the name of it, but like a humic and fulvic like liquid that I used to put in there for a while that I did think that I felt pretty good from. Maybe that was just because I wasn't getting the proper minerals, and you know humic and fulvic does have some mineral content, so maybe I was just absorbing minerals, and maybe they were moving out some toxins or something. But for the most part, I just do coffee now that I'm taking all the supplements that are on the mineral program.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like people get so weirded out about when
I
they
know.
hear like enema and they're like, I'm not putting anything in my butt and like all this stuff. And especially men, I would say more than women, have a really challenging time with this based on just, you know, programming from our culture. And even me, like I'm 48 years old and it took me till I was 47, no matter how many times I've heard people mention this. And back in the day, I heard Ben Greenfield doing them and I was like, I'm not doing that. Like that seems crazy. And at 47, I like finally tried it out because I heard enough podcasts about the benefits. And I heard finally somebody from the Gerson therapy. It was like Max Gerson's granddaughter or something was talking about doing coffee enemas and why they use it for cancer and healing. And I'm like, oh my God, she had so much good information about the benefits. I was like, I have to try it and just get over this. And after about 10, I got comfortable and I'm like, okay. And I'll tell you what, like, get over yourself. Like, it's, if you're listening to this, you're like, I'm never going to do that. Like, there's huge benefits to doing things like this that a lot of people aren't willing to do. And it's not that bad. But I noticed after about 10, I started to have like stuff come out that was probably trapped, like chemical smelling stuff, like nasty, strong, like actual chemical. And it was like, I felt so good after a few more of those when I got that out. And since then, that has never happened again. But it was like it takes what was described as like most people have so much impacted fecal matter in their colon just to begin with that getting all of that out and actually like getting to the side of your true colon from getting that fecal matter that's caked on there out. Some of that stuff's been held there for like 40 years in some of us. And starting to move that and get it out of the body is critical as we age. And what you're saying is it helps with, the removing these metals from the body. So I really think like that I would agree that's probably a part of the process that many people aren't willing to do. But I think it's like a really important part that can be extremely helpful, even if you're not even on that HTMA program.
Yeah, I mean, I did enemas for quite a while before I even did the program because I was just so sick and, I was listening to Ben Greenfield. And yeah, it just helps everybody on the program. Because you start to move things around, you start to feel sluggish, you might have a headache, and then you'll do an enema and you'll just like get through the rest of your day. It just helps everything out. And some people say there's like research around like it raising glutathione levels by like 700%. I've still yet to see actual data of that. I don't know how that kind of spread around the internet. Even like Ben Greenfield, I think, put it in an article, but then I've heard some people say there's not really science about it. I couldn't find that, but even if it raises it by 10%, I'm cool with that. And then gets the rest of the toxins out of the liver and out of the bile, so I'm cool with it. And it's just much needed if you're on a program like mine. And some people just power through and don't do them, more power to them, but you're going to have more of the actual detox symptoms if you don't do them.
Are you guys doing any of the olive oil detox with the gallbladder and liver flushing?
So my buddy Adam Marifiotti is the owner of Lifeblood, pretty cool supplement company. I had him on the show to talk about that because he
Mhm.
posts about it a lot. I've still never tried that. I mean, I'm doing the ox bile, I'm doing the enemas. I feel pretty good doing that. Got the sauna, so I don't know, but I've heard a lot of people get a lot of great benefits from that.
I've done it. I've done it a few times. I did it the last time I did the liver flush, or it was gallbladder.
So
Um,
can you
uh,
describe what it is?
Well, it's yeah. So you take well, actually, I mean, it's quite extensive. I've done a couple different protocols, but it's really you drink apple juice to soften all the kidney stones, right? Is that your gallstones? Gallstones. That's what it is. And so you drink apple juice a lot for like a few days or maybe even a week before. It's been a while. And then you take is it phosphorus? I think.
It's like some kind of phosphor, but yeah.
Yeah, to like really soften. And then you drink a cup of olive oil with a little bit of lemon or grapefruit, and then you lay on your right side like you do an enema and the fetal position, and you go to bed at 9 o'clock. Like that's really important that you go to bed at 9 o'clock in that position. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're just like dumping like stones. So you're really softening everything up so that you can eliminate. And yeah, it works. But I tell you what, it's nauseating. The last one I did, like I almost threw up because drinking a cup of olive oil, like you have to have a brand new bottle and drink it through a straw
Quickly.
and it's like go. Yeah. I
So
mean, it's not.
you won't want to have olive oil for like a year
Yeah.
after that.
I'm just getting back to like liking and really enjoying olive oil from that. And I'm like, I don't want to
3
eat
years
olive oil, so I don't want to do that anymore.
But so the theory is like it helps remove gallstones that you've had in your body for 30, 40 years. And some people then have issues passing those if they get big enough.
Yeah.
So this protocol supposedly empties your body of these gallstones by softening them up with phosphor and the apple juice. And then it eliminates them by drinking this lemon juice and olive oil. But I'll tell you what, like to not throw up after drinking a cup of olive oil is challenging. So it's a pretty intense protocol and supposedly it works really well. But I was just curious if you've played around with that, but it sounds like not.
Now, just the enemas, I'm more so worried about what I think are the major markers in human health, and that would be the metals. And without using the minerals to get them out of brain tissue and organs, because they're really not trying to be released unless they have the mineral that's going to be substituted for that enzyme binding site. So when it holds onto the metals, like we demonize them so much, but it's also keeping you alive. The problem is when you have mercury or aluminum or something at the enzyme binding site instead of, say, calcium or zinc or whatever your body would prefer, your enzyme sites are running at maybe 10, 20%, but it's keeping you alive. But the problem is then it starts to add up and build. And, there's studies where they give, I think, like rats, like a certain amount of aluminum and they all stay alive, and like a certain amount of like lead or mercury and they all stay alive. And then they give rats both of those doses combined and all the rats die. So we start to become like these alloys and mixtures of different metals. And so if you only had one exposure, you might not be so bad. But the problem is I see people with 4, 5, 6 different metals. And then another thing people don't realize, like, some people may know about like iron's becoming like this new big thing, that toxic iron can cause a lot of these issues. And I was donating blood and stuff for a while because I have the hemochromatosis gene. But aluminum and lead actually affect the iron system quite well. But also, we release a lot of other minerals on the system that people are on the program that people don't actually realize are causing a lot of damage as well, like hidden copper toxicity. Manganese is a big one. So they used to
Mm.
use lead in gasoline, and now they use manganese. It's also in the tap water that we all grew up drinking. So a lot of people have these crazy like dumps of manganese. So it's like
Mm.
not just the metals, the minerals can be in different valence states as well. And so then you will dump some of the excess, like, excess calcium is one, manganese. So, sometimes chromium and selenium are a little bit like that too. And so, like, people don't realize, like, you are just loaded with not only improper forms of minerals and the metals, and then they all tend to get released. And as they do, it can feel a little rough, but you'll feel better once you get through it.
So what do you do with children differently? Like, children aren't going to do enema. I mean, that's
Yeah, so we work with kids. Obviously, the dosing's a lot lower, and
mhm,
they usually do like 2 times a day instead of three with the
mhm,
dosing. And some parents are diehard, crunchy and hippie, and their 13-year-old might do an enema.
mhm.
But most times we do like different things. And the thing about kids is they generally react really fast. So they have
Oh,
less, they don't have the decades of the congestion. So a lot of times they respond very quickly. So it's
mm,
actually really good if you have children to put them on a program, because they generally pop out of like burnout and stuff a lot faster than adults do. But we like to do things like reflexology for kids, even if the parent does it, just like when they're laying on the couch. And then you can buy like sometimes the adults will have the kids in the sauna if they're a little bit, old enough, and maybe not keep them in there as long. So if they have a sauna, they might have their kids in there. But we recommend like these, you can get like a Philips 240-watt light bulb for like $10, or like Sauna Space sells one for like $100. That's if you have the budget for that. So I recommend things like that. And you can put that like over the kidneys, over the liver, over the abdomen. And kids generally like that because it feels like comforting and warm. So there's like supportive things that we can do for kids that aren't like get in the sauna and go super hard and do the
yeah.
enemas. Obviously, we work with them, and sometimes kids don't need any of it. They just like
Mhm.
bounce back a lot quicker.
What about lymph, Matt? Like, how are you like rebounding and like how are you getting the lymph to move?
Yeah, any of those things that you could do, I wish everybody could do a flow presso. I'm not sure if you guys have played
Oh yeah.
around with that. Like if everybody had one of those near them, they'd probably move along a lot quicker.
Hmm.
Also, I think the reflexology is overlooked a lot. I was doing it like every 2 weeks for quite a bit, and that'll open up the detox pathways more than people actually think if you get the right practitioner. But yeah, if you're rebounding, any kind of lymphatic, obviously I have my PMF mat over here that I like. Also helps just get the mitochondria going. There's red light on my mat. So any of these like devices, ozone, are all like additive, hydrogen. But I like the program at the base, and then all that stuff's just extra. Some people come to me like right out of the bat, like wanting to buy a hydrogen machine. I'm like, you got a lot of work to do before you spend 3 grand on a
Nice.
hydrogen machine.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
what are you noticing, Matt, after people go through the protocol? Like what types of changes do they notice?
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. I just did a call the other day, and this lady was in like 4 lows, burnt out pattern. She's like, she's literally been on the program like two and a half
Wait, can,
months.
can I have you pause for a second?
Uh-huh.
What did you just say? 4 loads?
4 lows is like, so when the first four macro
Lows.
minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium, are all below ideal levels, we call that 4 lows. And that's like the
Okay.
most extreme burnt out pattern. That means you've been in sympathetic dominance for so long that just everything starts to shut down. And
Okay.
then you're basically like, that's generally people who come to me a lot. And so 4 lows is like what we call the most burnt out pattern. And it needs
Okay.
like a special program for that. But yeah, she's like, I lost 10 pounds. Like I can't even work out. She goes, I'm almost scared I might lose too much weight. She's like, I'm sleeping through the night. I feel better. She's like, I
Mhm.
worked out like a couple times, but it was light, things like that. And so, less anxiety, less depression. Sometimes, the sometimes that depression and anxiety gets a little bit worse when you're moving things around, and then you eliminate some of the metals, and you go, wow, I actually feel better. And sometimes people forget where their starting point was too. They're almost just like happy to be just doing their daily things and feeling better. And Cole's on the program with me, like, a lot of like regulation of like menstrual cycles and things like that. One lady that I'm working with, she just got pregnant. She's been on the program maybe only like 4 months. She's like, we were
Mm.
already trying for like 6 months. So I feel like it had to be the minerals. So the minerals are regulating all the hormones as well. So the enzymes control the hormones. So when you get the enzymes running correctly, then you get the hormones running correctly. So obviously you can gain weight sometimes because of the toxins moving around. They're trying to like help save the organs. So you can create some water weight sometimes, and then generally you'll get a little bit skinnier than you were. So you can kind of fluctuate in weight, but that's just like the balancing of the hormones. People sleeping better is a big one. Generally, a lot of people like are waking up a lot throughout the night. You start giving them more of that like calcium and magnesium, and they generally tend to sleep a little bit better. And I kind of want to touch on that for a second while we're here.
Yeah.
Is I think the biohacking space, the health space, whatever it is doing a disservice by just saying, let's just keep taking magnesium forever by itself without realizing that things are always in relation to one another within a mineral system. So I can see some biohackers charts where the magnesium just super high in relation to the calcium.
Mm.
And what that'll actually cause over time is when your calcium magnesium ratio is low, it actually causes more of like a hypoglycemic state. So you're going to have more of a problem, tolerating simple sugars and carbohydrates because calcium is actually needed for proper insulin signaling. And then magnesium is needed to make sure the blood sugar doesn't get too low. So there's like this carbohydrate war without anyone actually talking about how the minerals affect the system. Chromium's also used. We give that to the diabetics. So you got to look at the chromium level a little bit for that. But the calcium magnesium ratio is the blood sugar ratio. So everyone's just demonizing calcium when it's one of the most important minerals. The highest metal that we have is aluminum, and calcium displaces aluminum. So
Mm.
how are we demonizing calcium? Like your body has tons of calcium in it that it can pull from, but why would we want that? What's that going to cause over time? Like, poor teeth health, dental health, brittle bone. You see old people with brittle bones. So calcium and magnesium in a supplement needs to always be coming in the right ratio. So
Mm.
I always tell people switch to a calcium and magnesium supplement. And then if you need more magnesium, take more of the CalMag supplement. That's going to do you better over time, keeping those coming in, even if you're not going to do a whole program. Because we have everybody on a calcium and magnesium supplement. So that you are not going to go wrong any which way by doing that. And I'll see, I just read a giant, really popular biohackers test 2 days ago that you guys know very well. Magnesium through the roof.
Mm.
Calcium was high because calcium will tend to follow it because they're synergistic with one another. So that also caused the calcium to be a little high, potentially causing some calcification. Instead of if he was taking the calcium and magnesium supplement, his ratio would have been a little bit better. So, those heavy metals actually displace the calcium and magnesium at the level of the pancreas, even. So they cause improper. So you got the heavy metals, you got the improper ratios, and then we're all sitting on Instagram fighting about if carbohydrates are bad or not. When in reality, we should be looking at the actual insulin response. Because if you go back 100 years ago, your great grandma was eating pastries for breakfast and drinking 3 shots of espresso, and she didn't probably eat again until 4 p.m. Didn't care. But
Right.
now we're all have all like this hypoglycemic, and people are getting anxiety, and like carbs are terrible. And it's like really it's your response to the carbohydrate. And yeah, people are overeating like high fructose corn syrup and stuff. But if you exclude those people, our little community here is all fighting over keto and eating 300 carbs a day. And it's really just crazy because everyone's going to tolerate them differently.
Absolutely.
Exactly. It's such a underplayed card on the individuality of how people respond to things. And also, so obviously the space we know well, Matt, like the biohacking space, I've also begun, a couple of years ago, moving away from that concept because it's polarizing for some people. A lot of the biohackers, they're looking for silver bullet and they just like, give me a supplement that's a silver bullet. And right now, one of the sexy supplements for a decade or more has been this magnesium because everyone's deficient in magnesium. And so we should just take as much as possible all the time, all day long, multiple times during the day without thinking in nature that packet of magnesium is probably not in the same form that you're taking if you're taking a pill, and it's packaged in the right ratio with a whole bunch of other stuff. So I think like the importance of a guide when you're doing a protocol like yours, like hair tissue mineral analysis, if you don't have a guide and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to take a bunch of magnesium or whatever supplement you're taking without balancing it and knowing that there's that balance and how it impacts the body to take one thing in isolation of everything else has negative impacts, and people do need to learn. We all need to learn a lot more about how that works. So I think that's great that you guys have a mechanism to kind of study the effects of that, and then you have a way to tailor some of those things.
Yeah, I have like so many thoughts swirling around my head, but I want to make sure like we get to like our audience here too with the corporate escape artist, Matt. And so, like you guys, this is one of those pillars too. Like we really have moved into like what Matt does, right? Like you're in the health space. And so without your health, I always say like without your health, like you don't have anything because you're going to spend all your time and all your money literally trying to get it back, right? Like we all know that's when you're sick, when you have the flu or a cold, you do everything possible to feel good again. So this is like the foundational pillar of like all of corporate escape artists, conjecture is like your health is literally the most important thing, as well as your finances and your mindset. But I really love, Matt, how like I've just been kind of thinking about from a 60,000 foot perspective of like where you started, like weed dealer, like, rap star. And listen to you, like, look at you. And you're a really young dude. And I'm like listening to like all this stuff that and like you're helping people and you're making an impact in the world. And like as an elder, like I'm really proud of you. Like this is really amazing. And I don't mean to sound weird about that, but it's like it's true. It's like you guys, anybody who's been, in situations where like maybe you weren't a big time weed dealer, but but in a corporate situation where like you're really unhappy and that's something that you want to move away from, like you're really an inspiration, Matt. And I just wanted to like just take a moment and just say thank you for all the good you're doing in the world. And there's always possibility, like look at the life you made. And I know you guys are expecting a baby and like this is so exciting, but and there's one thing early on when you said the randomness of the condo that you guys manifested. I don't agree with that. Like I don't think there's anything random. Like you magnetized, you and Cole, like as a unit, right? Like the male and the divine masculine, divine feminine, like when those two, come together, you create something that's, I mean, making new life, right? Like it's so beautiful and it's so, I don't even like, it's almost like no words for that, but you guys are magnetizing this stuff into your world and like you deserve that. So like there's no, I'm not shocked that you magnetize something like that into your world. And so like I think too, like there's always things that are going to come into your world if you have your mindset right to open, and you're super open in possibility and figuring shit out. And so like the world is going to give you evidence of that. And like how would you have ever thought that somebody would offer you that, what I mean, in your wildest dreams, right? Like that's crazy. And so being open but also being receptive. So I think that's like a thing that, yes, you're very masculine, but I feel like you're also, and I've met you a few times, you're really open and like you're really receptive to things. And I feel like a lot of times men, and I'm not picking on men and women, but a lot of times men get really stuck in like, oh, can't be like a woman. That's soft and blah blah. And it's like, no, we need a certain balance of both. Just like what you're saying with the magnesium and calcium, right? Like what a great analogy. But like I really applaud your receptivity to welcoming even just that. If somebody with a huge ego, Matt, would have been like, no, I don't need a handout or I don't need a, whatever. So I'd love you to respond to that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words about
Yeah.
us. We've worked awfully hard to get where we're at. But
Yeah.
yeah, the one thing I think that has got me to where I'm at as well is, being very, very flexible, like
Mhm.
the unlearning, the unbiohacking
Mhm.
almost. Like, I did carnivore and vegan, and I was like vegan keto at a moment, which is literally insane. Like you're just eating like avocados and coconut oil and olive oil all day and you have like no protein. But it's kind of insane. Didn't last very long, but I tried it. So I've done like every diet, I've done every supplement and a bunch of different protocols. And, had I, stuck within those realms, I always never wanted to be like put inside of a box. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to base my whole entire existence off of like animal based diets or I'm a keto guy or whatever. Like, I'm always open to new things for sure. And you did hit the nail on the head for sure with with like the health aspect, right? Like I always say, like energy is the currency of the future. Like the more toxic we're becoming, if you have energy moving into the next couple decades, you're going to excel in everything. You're just going to outpace every single person. Like people are just getting sicker and sicker and sicker because now we're like 4 generations into the industrial revolution, right? The
Yeah.
lead paints and the gases, and now we got geoengineering. So if you are removing the metals as they come in over the next couple decades, you're almost going to be like superhuman because everybody else is going to keep building those over time and think I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, and then not realizing that, you know, maybe they only have a little bit of anxiety or a little bit of fatigue, but they're still getting their corporate job done and taking care of the family. But if you just had unlimited energy, you would come home from that job, or on your work break you would work on your own stuff, similar to what maybe you guys are doing, right? You guys take care of yourself, so you have energy on the side to do this podcast, to do retreats, and do whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
The other people who are doing the corporate jobs, they're just like eating takeout food and Uber Eats or whatever, and just like getting through their day. And then, you know, if you guys stacked on something like, you know, heavy metal detox protocol next couple decades, you'd be like untouchable, because the clearer your thinking is, you know, the metals really disrupt a lot of like neurological and neurochemistry as well. So it's like you don't even have the same like dopamine and serotonin and empathy. All of that stuff is created by energy and balance. And so if you have all of those things going for you, then you're just going to be ahead of the curve no matter what. And I also, you know, to link into some of the stuff you guys do, because we're very similar with the spirituality and stuff.
Yeah.
I actually think, as far as like your aura goes, you know, no data for this, no science on this one, but just pure, you know, my theoretical opinion about it is, I think that they're actually, it's done on purpose, because I think that the heavy metals, if you look at even just like how their food system is in Europe compared to America, there's clearly some form of like intent with the toxicity, I would say, because it's like the same brand, 2 different ingredient markers, right? So you have to realize, why are they doing that? Well, for one, America's the most powerful country. We're also the only ones with freedom and guns. And so how do they lower us down to a lower level? It's the toxicity. And so when you have more toxicity in your system, you actually have a lesser ability, in my opinion, to manifest or attract the things that you want. Because even if you're doing the meditations and you're doing the work, there's an actual block in your energetic system. So it's actually collapsing the maybe opportunities or the network connections from actually coming to you. You have to work harder to make the manifestation happen. And that's just kind of my ideology on the toxic substances that they're putting inside of our bodies from every which way, because they want that lower level. They don't want you to have the energy to create, to rebel, to do things that you love. They don't want any of that.
That's a
100%.
It's a really good point about your spiritual body and the energetic body that's all around us. So we have like, some people say 5 bodies, some people say more than that, but it's like you've got your physical body. We can measure this energetic, this electric body around us with actual scientific devices. And then there's like the spiritual body and the astral body. There's like all these light body things around us. And the more energy you have to charge those up from different ways, like the more you can navigate what's coming. And as most people know by now, recording this podcast in 2024, Matt, is like, there's a lot of shit coming our way over the next few years, including like this year. And so having the energy to overcome the thinking, most people use lazy thinking, and they get their news and information from like Instagram and Facebook, or God forbid TikTok, where everything comes in these like really short snippets of information, and it's really called content. People are like, I'm a content creator, and like you're creating content which is meant to be consumed in little tiny bites and then largely forgotten, because it really just moves your subconscious in a direction that other people want it to go, and maybe you don't. The other idea you presented is like on purpose toxicants, or toxicants in our food, water, air, that are done on purpose. And I think of the major one, which you hit on a number of times, which is aluminum. And think about the aluminum that we put into vaccines, whether you believe in vaccines or not, like your body, your choice, put whatever you want into your body. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to do it, but you can put anything in your body that you want in order for what they say, in order for that vaccine to work. they, s- they, they, they say,
They're dropping confetti.
like,
I
stop.
haven't seen that one.
Well, trying to rain on my parade. What the heck? So if you're watching this on YouTube, go check it out on YouTube. There's some Apple AI stuff that's happening for whatever. So with the vaccines, they add aluminum on purpose to the vaccine to reduce the ability of your immune system to work properly. They have to depress your immune system for your body to take in this, what they call this negative thing in the vaccine, the thing that's supposed to give you immunity. You have to suppress the immune system with aluminum, which is what we're exposed to with, think about it, aluminum cans, whether it's soda, canned food, whatever. All these cans are aluminum. Your bicycle is aluminum. Your car bodies are aluminum. Your airplane bodies are aluminum. Supposedly in the chemtrails, like barium and aluminum and some other things are falling from the sky.
Tinfoil.
Tinfoil, we wrap everything in tinfoil or whatever it is. We're pushing this aluminum that we know depresses our immune system into our body all the time.
Matt, what's the biggest contributor in aluminum toxicity?
I say it to every single person. I think it's geoengineering.
Really?
I do.
Interesting. Huh.
So if you're not familiar and listening to this podcast, you should be. Like, geoengineering is basically earth engineering. So it's the ability of man to engineer through science ways of changing something around us on the earth. A lot of the geoengineering tends to fall around like blocking out sunlight. So we're like, hey, we should fix the ozone layer. We should block sunlight for this reason. We should reduce carbon dioxide for this reason. And what we don't know as men and women is when we make a change to a complex system, we get unintended consequences. So blocking out the sun because we have global warming, which I think is not accurate in any way whatsoever, but blocking out the sun to reduce warming is going to have a huge unintended consequence on all sorts of things. So geoengineering is using these particulates, typically metal particulates, because they reflect the sun back into the atmosphere instead of onto the earth. Doing that has a major cost both to our health from aluminum embedding itself in our body as we breathe the air, but also like who knows what else we're doing.
Okay, so having said that, Matt, what are like a couple things that people can do to, if they want to work with you, we'll get to that, but what can people do to eliminate, heavy metals in their, let's just keep going with the heavy metals in their environment? Like what are a couple things that you suggest are top priority?
It's going to be really difficult because of geoengineering, but you can obviously, I have a greenfield water filter, whatever super good water filter you like. Air quality just in general indoors
Mhm.
sucks. Get some, plants that are recommended by NASA's Clean Air Act or
Okay.
Air Doctor, or I always tell people even a really good like hypoallergenic air makes my favorite furnace filter. So they have a carbon
Ooh.
block on the actual furnace filter. Your furnace is actually circulating more air than any Air Doctor or molecule or whatever air filtering device you could ever do. I still have those, but your furnace filter is the, circulating the air in your entire house. So if you get a great furnace filter, change it every month, that's going to get a lot of dust and things that are clogging you up in general. It's not really heavy metals, but I think clean air and clean water are like top of the line. And then a
Awesome.
sauna is really great. And if someone's not going to even work with me, I always say my buddy Jeff Hoyt makes the most amazing zeolite. I can connect you guys if you guys want to do a zeolite episode.
Oh,
He's
sure.
amazing. He was just on. I just connected him with Blackburn, and they did a show together. It was great.
Oh,
Um,
great.
he has like I swore off binders for years, and then I got introduced to Jeff, and I take 20 grams of zeolite powder a day. If anyone knows zeolite dosing, it's usually in micrograms. Like,
Really?
but what Jeff found is that those small amounts of zeolites actually just bust up biofilms and kind of create more havoc instead of actually having enough zeolite in the system to capture everything and remove it out. And honestly, every single client person I've recommended this zeolite for feels better on the higher dose. So it's like his actual whatever theory or however he got to that higher dose theory, it really makes sense with every single person. And I stack that on top of the mineral balancing protocol. And I think it helps dumb down some of the detox reactions. So I take like 2 scoops, about an hour after my first dose of minerals, and then 2 scoops before bed because we're going to detox during nighttime anyways, during sleep. So if you don't want to do the whole retesting every 3 months and doing all the supplements that I recommend, you could just do a pretty high dose of Zeocharge. I have a whole like 3-hour podcast with them. If you guys want to check them out with a discount code on my show, I think that's a great option just for the fact that you're going to be exposed no matter what. So if that's like, I like that because I know that the minerals are going to go deep into the tissues. And then also I got the Zeocharge on the backup because, you might eat out at a restaurant and there's glyphosate on something, because the Zeocharge will also grab molds and plastics and different, other
Really?
chemical things. And mineral balancing actually detoxes all of those as well. So we stick to the heavy metals because you can actually see them on the chart. So it's good for clients to be like, oh, I eliminated some aluminum or some mercury this round. That's why I felt so bad. But really, the minerals are actually upregulating the endogenous detox pathway. So you're actually going to eliminate different chemicals and molds and plastics in the system as well. We just can't measure that with HTMA.
Sure.
So it's like you're upregulating glutathione and different, superoxide dismutase. All that stuff is ran by minerals and enzymes. So you're actually going to eliminate other things too. And the parasites obviously come out as you detox all of the chemicals and metals and stuff as well. So, but Zeocharge is great. I always tell people, if you don't want to, cut your hair and do that every 3 months and pay me, just take some Zeocharge.
Okay, so I was just at a women's retreat this weekend in Houston, this past weekend, and we did an ionic foot bath. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, by the way.
AMD.
I don't
What is
know.
it?
It was
Um,
gross.
yeah, no, well, I haven't tried it yet. There's actually, I thought about doing a show with them, but I haven't tried it
Okay.
myself. But through research over time, I've landed on AMD, seeming like it's pretty solid. I think some of the cheaper ones might be removing something, but it doesn't have the science behind it. But
Okay.
AMD seems to be pretty solid. I know some people who have gotten some pretty good results with that. My buddy Freddie Kimmel really loves AMD. There's
We
a
love Freddie. How do you know
yeah.
Freddie?
Yeah, I had Freddie on my show. We chat all the time. Yeah, I love
Oh,
Freddie.
really? We
Uh-huh.
just met him at a retreat this winter at the Sherpa
Yeah,
Breath
he's the
and Cold.
best.
Oh my God, he's literally the
He's
best.
just a ball of energy. It's hard
Yeah.
not to like Freddie. He's
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh my God, he's so cool.
Yeah, he used
Kristen,
to. I
yeah.
think he used to like speak or be in collaboration with AMD for sure. It was
Oh,
one of his
really?
healing mechanisms along his like cancer and mold and everything that
Oh,
he
okay.
beat. There's a chiropractor near me that does AMD foot baths for like, I don't know, they're relatively cheap. I think it's like 20 or 30 bucks because you only
Yeah.
do it for like 30 minutes. So I think about going out there and trying a couple and then maybe getting one. But I think it's probably a good option if you're getting one that's actually doing something. I think there might be
Right.
some gimmicky ones that are like 60 bucks or 80 bucks. Like
Yeah.
the AMD is like $2,000.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, we saw that. I think I was on that website recently. I want to just jump back to the zeolite because the woman I was talking to, she was like, "Hey, you've got." She actually said, Matt, that I have a lot of heavy metals. I used to be a welder, so I'll be
Oh,
working
for
with you at
sure.
some point. At some point in the future, we'll be working together. I guarantee it. But she recommended this product, and she was like, "This is the. Can you see that?" She
Yeah,
said,
it's Clinotep zeolite. That's what his is,
"Is it okay?"
but it's probably not in the same doses like Jeff's.
Yeah. So that's what she said, that is the thing that's because I have a zeolite these are drops too. And I have a zeolite, but it doesn't have this in it. And she said that's the thing that you really want. And there also, I had a couple parasites. I had checked off like a little bit of yeast and I don't know, a couple other things, but I was like, I was like curious myself. I'm like, is this gimmicky? Because I've heard, both sides of that story. And there was like a couple parasites as well. And I was like, oh, it's so gross, like seeing that stuff. But it's like
The ionic
the
foot bath.
ionic foot bath. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind like I am so anti parasite cleanses that it's unreal. I cannot get over how often I see people get worse from parasite cleanses
Mm,
because they're actually there. They're opportunistic
They
creatures.
hold on to the heavy
They
metal.
hold on to the heavy metals. So you use herbs to kill the parasite and you see some come out in the toilet. So you're thinking, yeah, this is a good sign. I'm getting rid of some parasites. Well,
yeah.
where do the metals go? Probably somewhere worse. They actually get recirculated into the system because you're not really focusing on the actual heavy metal aspect of why they're even there in the first place. And so then the metal
Really?
could recirculate into the brain, which is a lot worse than if it was down by the gut or the
Mhm.
kidney or, wherever else it was at.
Hmm.
So like I did all these crazy parasite cleanses and never seen a parasite when I was sick. And then throughout mineral balancing, tons of them just came out just by upregulating the immune system, getting my energy
Really?
reserves back and getting rid of the metal. So I don't like parasite cleanses. I think they can make a lot of people worse. I actually advise my buddy against doing like the symbiotica stuff because I it's a good product and it's made really well and it's potent. And he got a lot worse from that because you're not really getting to the actual root of that. You're just killing the parasites off. And he gained some weight, emotional issues. So, and I was like, dude, I
Oh,
told you not to do that. Like, not without like a proper focus on the metals or some kind of extreme, maybe Zeo charge stacked with that might have been okay or something. I
yeah.
don't know, but the heavy metals get released into the system. And that's why even doing improper detoxes can be harmful because if you just
Mm.
move the metal around and it doesn't actually get escorted out of the body, your body places the metals in the places that it feels safest. And so if you just move it
Mm.
around and you don't actually get it out, it can go to a place that it was worse off than before, like the brain. So if it
Really?
ends up being in the brain, it's going to be worse than if it was in the kidneys. So you're going to want to
Oh,
kind of just move with, and so when we're giving the body the minerals that it wants, it releases the metals when it feels comfortable.
okay.
So the body, so you kind of have roller coasters. You can feel good for like a month on mineral balancing, and then you get some energy, and then the body releases, and then you
Mm.
go back up and you feel good, then the body releases. So it's like it ebbs and flows, and that kind of just shows you that it's actually doing something. Because you have the days where you're like, man, I felt awesome for like a week, and then you had another dump or something. So the body's doing it as it feels comfortable and safe, and has the proper mineral that it wants.
Beautiful. Okay, so you guys, Matt said clean up your water, clean up your air, replace your furnace filters, and then try to get in the sauna. I know like Thaddeus and I try in the winter at least 4 times a week, but that seems like a lot. But it's actually really cathartic in the sauna anyway. So like you're detoxing and it's like nurturing for your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And then what was the other thing I was gonna say? Um I was gonna oh, I know what it was. Can you tell everybody your podcast and your discount code? So if they do want to like go try that, the Zeo, what did you say? What did you
Zero
call it?
charge.
Zeo Charge. If they want to try that.
Yeah, so I have an ad for it on my podcast. My podcast is Integrative Thoughts. So ITP is the discount code for the Zeo Charge. It stands for Integrative Thoughts Podcast. I have tons of podcasts on mineral balancing. I also talk a lot of different random supplements and, psychedelics and whatever. There's all kinds of different topics on my show. But yeah, you can listen. I have an entire show with Jeff Hoyt, the creator of that Zeo Charge. So if you're not sure, or you want to know
Okay.
more about the dosing, I always say the dosing is really important because sometimes people will take 2 scoops and they kind of feel awful, and then they take another 2 and they feel good. So it's good to at least just familiarize yourself with Jeff and the dosing. He has a bunch of great episode or little short videos on YouTube as well that are really just straightforward, informational. So there's a lot to find from Jeff.
Awesome.
And then how do people work with you for hair tissue mineral analysis if they want to do that?
Yeah, so my website is Integrative Thoughts. I'm also at Integrative Matt on Instagram. So you can click HTMA consultation on my link tree in Instagram, or just go to www.integrativethoughts.com and click the HTMA section. And I just like to let people know it is like, 7 supplements a day, 3 times a day. It's more of a commitment. You have to retest every 3 months. I don't like to just take like people's money just because. I'd rather them know. So listen to my shows, listen
Mhm.
to what can arise and what can happen on the program. And just so you're not like doing a test and then you look at all the supplements and go, I'm not doing all this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we call it mineral balancing, but it's actually like more of a total package, in my opinion. It's like um, terrain theory, like on steroids, in my opinion. So there's like desiccated glandulars that we give, obviously, because like supports like. So there's liver in there, and then we give kidney glandulars that help the kidneys as you're moving everything around. The ox bile supports the bile flow, and then the pancreatic enzymes, the TMG. All of that stuff is supportive because you need it when you're moving things around and it's tough on the system. So people wonder, like, oh, I thought I was just doing like a couple minerals, but it's like it's more than that if you're actually detoxing, because all the
Mhm.
organs and everything need support. So it's a complete program. That's why you're on like 7 supplements.
Beautiful. The retreat I was just at, Matt, it's a women's formula that it's called Birthright. And so it's an ancestral formula, and it is all liver support, kidney, thyroid. They put oyster in it and
Mhm.
dandelions. There's a lot of really cool stuff in it too. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
really
the
impressed.
liver needs more support, I would say, than ever. That's why the coffee enemas help quite a bit. It's
Yeah.
the liver is just like the soccer mom of all of your organs, and we're expecting it to do all the things that it's supposed to do
Mm.
with all the toxins in the system, and it's just not doing it.
How do you feel?
I feel pretty complete. I feel like I want to go for another hour, but we'll have you back on
Yeah,
the podcast if you want to, and we'll go down the psychedelic route with that
yeah,
and
would
and
love to.
talk about
Obviously,
combo.
combo psychedelics. I'm
Yeah.
always down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned combo, and I think a lot of people, perhaps from the corporate world, listening to this don't know what combo is. So stick around for the next podcast with Matt, where we
Yeah.
can talk about why Matt's a combo practitioner, what it means, as well as other psychedelic experiences. Because I've got my own personal thoughts on psychedelics, and I would
Yeah.
love to hear about combo and let people know what it means and what it is from your standpoint, since you're a practitioner. I think that would be fascinating.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you and your
Yeah,
time and all the good you're doing in the world.
yeah. Thank you guys.